Hello, hello. I'm Rich, and I'm delighted to say today that I am joined by the voice of Fabien from Bloodlines 2, Mr. Ronan Summers. Thank you very much, first of all, for joining us, Ronan. As I am, a bit of a fan myself, I thought I'd do the intro for you, rather than having you go through the motions yourself, as I'm sure you're burnt out on that as it was. But yeah, you guys may have seen Ronan actually on your screens in Jurassic Park. Also Vikings as well in season 7, and more recently as the lead Carl Kane in Halloween. But Ronan also does a lot of great work in the gaming industry, and that's why we're here today. In fact, he's done a lot of my favourite games: Cyberpunk, Hitman 2, which I played through recently, actually, Horizon Zero Dawn as well, I believe, just to name a few. However, we are here to talk about actually my personal favourite role of Ronan's, which is Fabien, the mysterious vampire detective from Bloodlines 2. An obvious place to start, Ronan, is how did this happen? How were you sort of approached for the role? What drew you to this project?
Well, I mean, lots of things drew me to the project. It's an inherently really cool world, and I had oh, first of all, thank you for having me, Richard. How rude of me. Yeah, no, it was incredibly enticing because I think vampires are really cool. I've always had a real thing for vampires. Of the Warner monsters, I think that they are definitely the coolest. They always have been for me. And as well as that, I was aware of the cast fairly early on. So we had the actors that I had worked with many times in the past who I knew to be phenomenal. People like Alec Newman and Jane Parry and David Menken, and people that I respect and who are friends as well as colleagues. So when I saw the cast list was so stacked, I mean, it was a no-brainer. And also, I have some friends who are World of Darkness fans, aficionados, and they had been talking about this game for the longest time. And there was a hell of a lot of anticipation and curiosity and frustration at what had taken so long for this game to come. And that seemed like an incredibly exciting, scary thing to get involved in. And I think that's always a good way to sort of choose your roles. The things that scare you a little bit for whatever reason are usually the things that are worth taking on. And also, obviously, the opportunity to do so many different character voices within the one role was something that you don't get to do very often as well.
Yeah. Just very quickly, like I'm not saying I necessarily prescribe to this opinion, but you mentioned, and I wholeheartedly agree that even vampires, like conceptually, are sort of super cool. I think they lend themselves well to like a whole sort of plethora of different lore. But do you feel like, or does part of you feel like there's sort of been I don't even know what the word is, almost like a gentrification of vampires in the last sort of however long, and that sort of World of Darkness. I mean, were you familiar with World of Darkness before and their sort of take on it, or was this your first sort of introduction to World of Darkness?
So I had like a cursory awareness of World of Darkness up until this point. I knew of the game. I knew more. To be honest, I'd heard more about like the tabletop role playing game than I had of the video games. But I was very much aware of the weight of expectation from the fan base on that. I think you're right, though. I think vampires have had a watering down over the last decade or so. I mean, I think Twilight really did a number on vampires and werewolves, to be fair. That those films have a lot to answer for, including, by the way, I don't know if you know this, 50 Shades of Grey was originally written as a piece of Twilight fan fiction. So
really,
I did not know that. Yeah, so we can blame 50 Shades on Twilight as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure, I think that there were better eras to be a vampire fan than the one that we find ourselves in currently. I mean, I've always been a huge fan of the Lost Boys. I'm a huge fan of Nosferatu. The original Nosferatu is still one of the most visually frightening films I think that's ever been made. I loved Bram Stoker's Dracula, the 90s one with Keanu Reeves and Gary Oldman. I just think they're really cool. And yeah, so I think they could do with a facelift, and I think that we were trying to do something a little bit like that with Bloodlines 2, to try to give them, if not totally reinvent the wheel, to maybe give the audience a fresh think of what it might be like to live in the shoes of a vampire. And that's the one thing that games are really great for, is that immersive quality where, watching a movie about something is one thing, but actually spending whatever the gameplay is, 40, 20 hours, whatever it is, to spend that time in the shoes of a vampire is a very different experience. So hopefully players get a little taste of that.
Yeah, no, I think you hit the nail on the head with. I always felt the coolest thing about the World of Darkness in general, and especially the games, is like it's taking a slice of the world as we see it and inserting vampires in a way where you could actually imagine they might try and integrate. Whereas I feel,
Right.
Nowadays, or I shouldn't generalize too much, but you do get a lot of the sort of just over the top, I am a vampire first and foremost, rather than, maybe I'm part of society with an ailment, or maybe not an ailment, depending on how you see it. But you mentioned earlier there, which I want to touch on, obviously the production timeline for this game is almost legendary at this point.
Yeah.
Obviously the release date, as you said, got pushed back a lot. The studio changed from Hardsuit Labs to the Chinese room. What was your personal experience of this? Were you involved from the very start, or did you come in when things changed?
No, I came in. I mean, I didn't even come in when things changed. I totally honestly came in right at the very end of the project, essentially. So there was a trailer, excuse me, there was a trailer released several years back now, of which I had no idea, no knowledge whatsoever, that had some early development footage from the game with a totally different actor voicing Fabien. I didn't see too much of it. I can't speak to the performance, and I know that one of the actors, that the actor who was playing Fabien, has remained in the game as a different character. But the audience response, I think it's fair to say, to that version of Fabien was not favorable. So for whatever reason, the Chinese room decided, I think that they initially tried, working with the actor that they had originally worked with to sort of bring the performance in the direction that they were looking for. But for whatever reason, I think that those choices that the Chinese room had made, the new choices that they made, brought things so far away from that actor that he wasn't able to really get there in the way that they were after. So I was brought on last minute, really, last summer, to do it all. I mean, do all of Fabien. We recorded all of Fabien's stuff in about 2.5, 3 months, which is kind of unheard of for a character this size. And it meant that I missed out on some things. So when they had done the earlier recordings, they had done big group ensemble recordings, which is something that you very rarely get to do in games, and I would have really loved to have been involved in. But I did get some time, luckily, to work with our female fire voice for the first few weeks at least, while she was finishing off her stuff, because obviously she was, Hara was busy for years, but not quite as intensely as I was. And Tommy, both the femme and the masculine fires, they had been working on it much more sporadically for a much longer time. But I think the production felt it was important for myself and at least one of the fires to be in the same room speaking to each other for a while in order to create that dynamic between the two of them, but then Hara finished, she finished all her stuff, and I still had thousands of lines to do. So then it was just basically myself and the production team from Chinese Room and Kate Saxon, our performance director, just hammering it away for a summer, and that's what we ended up with. It's what you've heard.
Pretty intense. Typically, for those who don't know, when you do a typical sort of voice acting performance, are you usually in sort of direct contact with the actors? Do they usually play you their line prompted so you can respond? Like, what is your typical process for that?
So it really depends on the production. It depends on where you find yourself doing the recordings in their development process. So, for instance, I'm currently the lead player in a player character in a game that I can't discuss, but which has been announced. My involvement hasn't been announced yet, but it is a big undertaking where in which I am the lead, which will be coming out next year. And there'll be more news there. So watch that space. But in that case, the whole game is really centered around the story of this one character. And they felt that it was very important for me to come in and set the tone for the other actors to work with. So for my first week or so, I was recording with my director reading in the lines for me as prompts. And then those recordings were taken off for the other supporting actors to use, so that they could match the tone that the game is at, because I'm setting that tone. And then, as the recordings go on, when I'm a lucky boy, some of those recordings come back from the other actors, and then I get to play off their prompts from the recordings, and they're played for me as if we're having a conversation. So that's when things get really nice and feel like natural, is when I can hear the performance that's coming at me, and I can give an appropriate reaction. Acting is really not acting. Acting is supposed to be reacting. And there are lots of brilliant things about video game acting, but one of the bigger challenges is to find that way of reacting when sometimes you're not reacting to anything at all. So that's the trick. But yeah, the more that you get the opportunity to hear the voice and feel the performance of another actor, the better both performances will be, for sure, every time. So whenever you do get an opportunity to do ensemble stuff, you should take it with both hands as an actor, because it really will improve the performance. And like I said, on Bloodlines, there was early ensemble recording where they had the whole cast in, but unfortunately I wasn't on board yet. But I've had it with some others as well. We did a lot of that for Battlefield 3, in which I played Montez, was a lot of mocap. But even our audio sessions, they tried to get us in together for as many audio sessions as we could. Obviously not every time, but again, that was important, I think, for the people at DICE to create the dynamic between the squad. The dynamic between a squad of soldiers is kind of what you're hanging your hat on in terms of a story like that. So it was paramount to them that we sounded like we knew each other, we were friends, we were in the same place, and we were able to bounce off each other in that way. In other games, it's not so important. When I work on the Forza Horizon games, for instance, it's a radio DJ, so it's very self-contained regardless. And crowd sessions would really be a waste of time. But in certain situations, I think it's really it's something that really is irreplaceable. So if they have the time and the budget to do it, then it's phenomenal. It's great.
Perfect. So yeah, obviously in this game, it's not your sort of atypical linear style game. Like, the player does get to make choices and stuff like that, and obviously you respond in kind to whatever's going on there. Does that make it more difficult as well, because it's not just a straightforward story from A to Z? Actually, the path is sort of winding and taking random turns. Did that make it difficult for you?
It made it incredibly exciting. All that stuff is really fun. It didn't make it more difficult. I would say it made it more time consuming. But that's the job, and that's the work, and that's what makes it great to play at the end. I think I have been most impressed with the ways that game developers have, over the last several years, really tried to nail down this this idea of choice within games. And I think as a player, I don't have the time to play tons of games anymore because I have kids. But when I do, the level of immersion is what, I think the whole thing lives and dies on. And if you can have this illusion of, and sometimes not even illusion, sometimes genuine choice in games, then that feels incredibly liberating from the player's perspective. So anything that we can do to create that sense, I'm all for. And I think it's the most fun stuff to do as an actor, because I get to play all of the options, emotionally speaking, as well. So I get to have my cake and eat it, which is great fun.
Yeah. So I don't know actually how much you or other actors are sort of aware about sort of general reception of certain things or whatever as and when they come out. Obviously, lots of people have lots of opinions on the game Bloodline in general, but just so you know, there's a panel of about I think 5 of us are going to do the big piece on Bloodlines. And one thing I think we all universally agree on is the Bloodline story is without a doubt one of the best recent story experiences like in gaming. Like the story itself is brilliant. Some people might have qualms about, you know, the ending or something or whatever, but the story in general, that how it's delivered, the narrative, the characters, the voice acting is absolute top tier. I'm just wondering that as being so intimately involved yourself and so in the weeds, I guess, are you aware as you're playing this character, as you're delivering these lines, are you aware that this is maybe something a bit special? Do you feel like the quality at the time, or is it something you have to see afterwards it's in its entirety to sort of think, okay, wow, that was actually pretty good?
That's a good question. 50-50, I would say. Sometimes it's clear. Sometimes you hear it, you know, when you get a little bit down the path of working on a new project, and it feels nailed on. It feels like something that, you know, this is clearly special writing, special actors, and things come together, that sort of lightning in a bottle situation. Sometimes it's much more vague and you have no idea until it comes out. You know, the game development process is so siloed and compartmentalized that you really only have access to your bits. And often the confidentiality behind all this stuff is really intense. So there'll be at times departments at the same developer who don't know what the other department is doing. So you even if you ask the question, the person that you're speaking to wouldn't know the answer. So sometimes it's incredibly hard to tell. This one, I had a really good feeling about in terms of all of that, and I think I was proved right. And it's very kind of you. Thank you for your words. We are very proud of it. Frankly, if I'm completely frank with you, it has been a little tough to see the response of some of the reviews and some of the audience, because not because I feel particularly precious about Bloodlines as opposed to any of the other games that I do. You know, it's every single game is a labor of love, and just like movies and games are, it's a miracle when they actually come to fruition and it all works out. And an entire team of people, hundreds of names, you know, worked incredibly hard on this game. I have no problem when a game is judged to be poor based on its merits. The reason that this one was tough to deal with, that it didn't receive great praise critically, was that I felt like a lot of the criticism for the game was actually not rooted in the work that any of us did on Bloodlines 2. It seems to me, from what I could read, far more to do with people who had been expecting a game for, you know, nearly 20 years being upset that we didn't make the game that they played 20 years ago. You know, that seems like an unfair criticism to me. Far be it from me to second guess World of Darkness and Bloodlines fans. I do not need the comment section coming after me here, and you guys are more than welcome to your opinion. But I would just encourage you to maybe, once you've calmed down and cooled off for a month or two, go back and have another look at Bloodlines 2, because I think if you take it on its own merits, as its own game, then, you know, I think that I stand by the experience that we created, and I think it's a rich world. And thank you for saying that about the narrative stuff and the performances. I agree with you from what I've seen. Like I said, some of the voice talent on this game is the reason that I signed on in the first place. So, and Chinese Room, the developers, are known for making incredibly engaging narratives. I mean, Still Wakes the Deep is tonally is I think a masterpiece. So yeah, it's the response to the game is always interesting. I tend not to care, but actually this one did get to me a little bit, because I just know that that the game in the box or that you download is better than the game in some of the reviews. And I think some of those reviews are a little bit biased in a way that was inescapable. So it's one of those things. But people have been incredibly kind about my performance, and that's been really, really lovely.
It's interesting.
So
It's interesting you say that, actually, because originally we were going to call this video series, where we sort of deep dive into all these games and their narratives, whatever, as games as art. So that was like the working pencil title, and I think that's something that Bloodlines really would succeed in, living up to that name. And I think I'm not going to speak for everyone, I'll just say from my perspective, but we obviously, as we're playing the game, we have a group chat, we're writing our comments like, oh, what do you think of this, what do you think of that? And I think all of us were in agreement that the big criticism of the game was exactly that you said, is like, maybe it's not like a true sequel to the first one, but if you put that to one side, the game, I think at worst, in X amount of years, will be a cult classic. Because if aside from anything else, I think, as I said, the narrative and the voice acting performances, and also the visuals, like even the unique way they frame the visual interactions of like foreground, and they do really creative stuff with lighting, I think it's going to age really well. As you said, maybe the reviews sort of piled up this level of 20-year-old angst or whatever that poured out into the words on the page immediately after release. But I think this one's gonna age pretty well. I'd put it that way. I actually wanted to touch on your character specifically a little bit. Obviously, Fabien is sort of a 20th century like throwback gumshoe noir character, but I would say not a caricature. I think he is actually quite subtle and not overstated. It's not sort of Rex Riveter, a private eye. Like, he's much more I think sort of tonally accessible, let's say. What was sort of your process of getting into that character? Did you pull influences from sort of Hollywood? Like, what is your normal process, and what was your process for Fabien?
Yeah, I mean, my process changes with every role. And that's kind of the spice of the whole thing for me. I really enjoy finding a new way into each performance, whether it's in film and TV or whether it's in games or whatever. With Fabien, I mean, I'm a big fan of like the Raymond Chandler novels and old black and white noir movies in general. So I had a good grasp of the tone for that. And then I think it was really just about, and it's very pleasing to hear you say that, to say what you said, because that was kind of what I was going for, is to try to have that gumshoe stereotypical noir guy who everyone knows and is a bit of a meme, a bit of a cliche, and imbue him with enough humanity that, I mean, humanity maybe is the wrong word for a vampire, but I think you know what I mean. But imbue him with enough humanity that the audience can go along for the ride with him and really feel like they are, at times trapped with him, at times trapped with him in their head, and sometimes trapped in Fire's head with him, to really feel like you're pushing and pulling the audience so that they never really feel like they know that, so they kind of always feel like they're on a bit of unstable ground, but that they have this Fabien character as someone to cling on to, so that, Fabien and the player, I think, go through the experience together almost more than Fabien and Fire do, because Fabien is kind of the way in for the audience, I think, into understanding this incredibly alien situation. I think if the audience had been exclusively with a character like Fire, throughout the game that you might, because Fire is an elder who is much more understated and much more jaded and much more hard and hardened, that there might have been a disconnect for the audience between that as a player character and the player. But I think Fabien adds those soft edges that Fire, by necessity, has lost through her however many hundreds of years of torpor, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think for me, one of the best sort of structural decisions that the game made was those moments you had at the end of each day, because people who haven't played the game yet, the game is essentially a distinct day into distinct day for however many days it goes on, and at the end of each day, basically Fire and Fabien have a sit down in their own mind and have this back and forth of like, what do you think of the day's events kind of thing. And I thought that was like a really clever touch. It's something I've seen a lot of other games do recently. There's been a recent game called Ghost of Yote, for example, where obviously set in Japan, and every time she basically goes through a sequence of events, she plunges herself into this sauna and just sort of has this like meditative little sequence, which I thought this was that sort of, turned up to 11. I thought it was sort of a very nice touch in that sense. I just wanted to ask you a couple of other very quick questions before I let you go. I was watching an interview you did a while back where the interviewer asked you about your sort of Mount Rushmore of movie characters. I don't necessarily want to ask you for a Mount Rushmore or, I need 4 or something like this, but I guess in terms of acting or voice acting performances in gaming that have really, either touched you or moved you or stayed with you, or just your favorites, do you have any that you could sort of pluck out as inspiring picks?
So I'll be honest, I am not a humongous gamer. So I'm a movie buff. I'm a film buff. Which is why I love movies that kind of scratch at that cinematic itch. Why I like games that scratch at that cinematic itch, And I think that and this is going to sound bad in a way, I tend to, unless they are the best, and some of the people that I mentioned already, some of my friends, I'm lucky to call them close personal friends, but some video game acting is not good.
Yeah, and that right.
and I think that most games are striving for, when I go into games that into a new game and they're giving me the breakdowns of what they want, usually these days what they say is they're looking for grounded, understated cinematic performances. They are not often looking for that. Sometimes they think that's what they're looking for, and then you give them that, and they want it bigger, and they want it bigger, and they want it bigger. I mean, if I'm thinking about characters that I have loved, I'm afraid I probably wouldn't be able to give you actors because I'm not good at that unless I know them. But I love Niko Bellic from Grand Theft Auto 4. I thought he was really cool. He was like, he had a little bit kind of what you were describing. He's funny and he's cartoonish in a way, in this cartoonish gangster way. But there was a humanity with him that you always felt you felt like he was a grounded character. Nathan Drake is, I think, one of the biggies in terms of that leap forward in cinematic storytelling in games. And part of that is to do with Naughty Dog, but part of that is also to do with that performance. What else? Oh, I mean, The Last of Us, those two. Okay. Both the young girl and the grizzled man. I mean, those will be my 4. I'm going to give you those as my 4 because, but yeah, I think they do get to take two for that game because that game was unreal. No, and like I said, I don't play many games, but that one knocked me off my chair.
Did you get a chance to watch the TV show as well, or?
I'm saving it, so I'm waiting. I got behind on it. I've heard all of the amazing things. I'm waiting until, I don't know, I break a leg or I'm
Sure.
sick for a couple of weeks, and I'm gonna munch them all when I get the chance.
But I've just been plugging this to absolutely everyone. So I've said, because like, again, when sort of researching different voice actors and different games or whatever, I always come back to like performances or even scenes that sort of really hit me. And the one I'm always bringing up right now, and it's like, I guess like my gold standard at the moment, is that there's a guy called Andreas Apergish, I think I'm pronounced that right, or Apergis or something, and he plays Cesare Bourgeois in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. So we're going back to like 2009, 2010 or whatever. And I always bring this name up because, as you said, what I find really interesting is sort of not even just expectations versus reality, but how we perceive a performance in a game versus the actual reality. And when I saw that performance in that game, I was like, oh no, he's movie acting in a video game. Like, that's different. Like, it just stuck out like such a sore thumb. I was like, that's what all acting performances should be like. And obviously the animation team did an incredible job. Like, it matches the passion and everything that he has in his voice. But it's worth like looking him. He is amazing. Well, that performance at least is amazing. I can't say I've seen him in too much else, but I always remember that one really sticking out to me. And as you said, not to be sort of crass or something, but sometimes there's almost shades of like porn acting, you know. It's just like, they're like, people, I don't want to say they're phoning it in, because there's a relationship between director and actor, and you don't know how much is one and the other and so forth. But I do feel that that's almost like the next step, because we're visually getting so good in gaming and able to do so much. If we can have performances that match that consistently, then to me that is the next frontier for gaming. Because as I mentioned earlier, and as you've sort of intimated to as well, I think those are the things that really stick with you. And to sort of summarize, for me, that's why I think Bloodlines is going to age really well, because regardless of all the qualms and independent issues of it's not exactly like the first one but updated, the actual pure story, the narrative, the performances are, I believe, in the top tier when it comes to gaming. And I think ultimately I can say with full honesty, I've played better video games than Bloodlines, but I remember so many I played the game on release, and I remember so many of those scenes so vividly that after I'm usually finished playing a game from start to finish, I just forget it almost instantaneously. Even if it was really fun to play, I remember the game was fun to play, but I don't hold on to those memories nearly as long unless they have a really impactful story and performances. So for me, that will be Bloodlines legacy. Obviously it's early days, but I think it will age very nicely. But yeah, thank you very much for joining us today, Ronan. I really appreciate you taking the time during this Christmas period. So thank you for that.
Oh, you're so welcome, Richard. And I'm so glad that you enjoyed the game. It's really gratifying to hear that, hear people responding to it. So yeah, it's great. And thank you for the support, and thanks for having me on.